How's it going, everybody? Sessiion here. Welcome to Final Fantasy XIV, and pretty much a discussion point that I wanted to throw out there in regards to a lot of talking points that are being established for patch 6.35 now that we have ourselves the new travel quest, the deep dungeon, as well as the next level upgrade for the Manderville weapons. That is the relic as well for Endwalker. Now, I'm hearing a lot of people, kind of throwing their ideas about how they feel about it and the weapons, and that's a whole separate topic, but mostly it's the acquisition of the new upgraded version of the relics. Now, to preface the whole thing, if you haven't done the Manderville quest, I highly recommend it. It's hilariously just a great sideline story, and they've also tied it into acquiring the newest relics for Endwalker, which will eventually be kind of like top contender for being the best weapons for the Endwalker expansion. So even right now, if you're trying to progress either like a trial or a dungeon or even like a raid, the weapons that you can get for this will be very helpful to you. So it's highly recommended that you go for them. Now, the way to get the weapon, or even just one relic, right, requires the astronomy tomes, which is the non-weekly capped tomes that you can have 2,000 of at most at one time. And it requires 1,500 to acquire one relic. Now, that was already kind of the baseline foundation of that relic, which is fine. But now people have learned that the next level of that, which is the Manderville upgrade that gives you a glow and a higher item level, which makes it a much more effective weapon to use for content, uses the same acquisition of 1,500 astronomy tomes. So you essentially need 3,000 astronomy tomes to get the baseline relic as well as the upgrade. And I think this is where people are starting to kind of figure out their sides on how they feel about that. And I think it's important to lay the foundation for, my opinion on how I feel about it, but also more importantly, the differentiation of people who are okay that the relic grinding is the same for both the weapon upgrade and the base, but also folks who may not be a big fan of that and would want something different. So I want to kind of give some talking points about both sides to give you kind of a perspective of what to look forward to and kind of why it was established that way. So hopefully, I can cover those points. Now, my opinion will be on the side of saying that it's okay that the grind for the upgraded relic is the same as getting the baseline kit, because there's a lot of content that you can do to get astronomy. Especially if you're level 90, you can do any content that is with duty roulette. You can do the hunt trains, which is the hunts for finding the marks throughout Endwalker, and you can even do them for Shadowbringers as well if you'd like to. Or like PvP, the whole variation of ways that you can get astronomy tomes to get those relics. Now, whether you play one job or 19 is completely up to you, of course, but if you're going for one relic, then it should be really easy to go for that small grind of getting 3,000 astronomy, and all of a sudden you have both your new weapon and your new shiny weapon, and now you're done, right? But if you're going for 19 weapons, then that grind is going to be a lot heavier and, of course, take more time, because you're essentially going to go for 57,000 astronomy tomes to get the relic baseline weapon and the upgraded version, and that's just going to be more shiny fun weapons for you to use. Now, like I said, I think it's important that it's okay that from my own perspective that they are the same grind, right? Because you need to get 1,500 astronomy for both the base and the upgrade. Now, the reason why I think that people are a bit perplexed by the fact that the grind is the same and they don't like it is because it's the same, right? It's really easy to get 3,000 astronomy for one weapon that you're going to be going for, because it's going to be very important for you to use, again, for content that you might be able to run for any particular purpose. Now, but again, if you're going for one, then you got one, you're done, right? So I think people are again missing the idea that like this is only the first step, right? You have the baseline weapon and you have the upgrade. There's usually like 6 or more weapons that are acquired through the relic grind that is established. If you think about Shadowbringers, they had what was the Bojin relic quest grind, and that was essentially a 6-step grind, which required you to do a combination of like the alliance raids and also content that was established inside of the actual instance for the content as a whole. And you needed to acquire items in a large sum in order to just be able to upgrade that next step. And usually it seemed like something that you had to do that was like out of the way, but you still were able to acquire things from it by just doing that content in general, right? So if you're going for what was like the Bojin Southern Front Grind or Zadnor, then you essentially can work toward getting clusters, right, that will let you acquire items from that content to use for yourself or to sell or whatever. But also, if you were like not level 90 at the time, you can even use that content to help you level up, because some of the things you had to do required you to just run that kind of content, and you can do it at level 71 to 80, and you can even use it post 80, right? And you can go to level 90 basically by just doing that content, which at the beginning of Endwalker expansion was something that a lot of people did, because it gave you quite an amount of experience at in a couple of hours of just sitting there grinding Fate, but you also grinded towards the relic. So I think that this game, with the Manderville questline grind for the relics, actually did a great job in allowing you to essentially gather the necessity of materials to get the relic, but you can also cross progress other things at the same time while working towards those relics, because of course if you're level 90 doing the deep dungeon, then you can essentially work towards your weekly 450 tomes, but also you can work towards the 2000 needed to just cap and then get the materials needed to get the upgrade for the relic, or just get the relic in general. So I actually would prefer that it's not something that you don't get out of doing the relic grind and just work towards that content and nothing else. I actually like that. I can still work towards a deep dungeon or anything I want to that just gives me astronomy, and still work towards something that allows me to get that weapon, because there's still so many other things that I can do while playing the game, and getting those tomes is kind of like a side tool or resource to acquire for that, because I'm not really super desperado to get every single weapon and relic upgrade like today, right? It's gonna take me some time, so getting 57,000 tomes might take a while. But I think it's supposed to take a while, right? I think it's actually good that they did that, because when we get to next level, which I think will be 640 and then like 645 or 650, whatever the number is, we don't even know what the grind is for those relics in the future, right? Because we're going to have the baseline version and the upgrade. Then that version gets kind of refined into a non-glow weapon that we have as like a next higher level item level, and then that weapon will have a glow, and then that will get refined, and then that will be the final glow for that weapon. And the item level for that final relic is usually 665, or the same item level as like the strongest savage weapon that you can get for the final tier of the expansion. So when P12 comes out, that will be 660 gear that's very powerful for all of your your body pieces and your accessories, but then the weapon will always be 5 item levels higher than that piece, which will be 665. So the relic will match that at the same item level, which will make it a very powerful weapon to use for any content for Endwalker related, between that and the next expansion. So going for that grind is going to be very helpful, for the long run if you work towards it. But again, we don't know what the steps are for those 2 subsequent like progression relics. So they might make that version of the next relic a longer grind than it currently is. So getting 50k plus tomes may seem like it's chump change, but then when you have to do some kind of content that requires you to go for 100 items of a thing, or you got to complete a dungeon like 30 times or whatever that it is, right? That's going to be another grind that you have to establish for your usage of the content for playing the game. So I think that's a point that people I think may be missing in terms of what you have to do. So that's how I feel about the grind for the current relic, and I think that's the side that I'm on as well. Now, I think that to help the give the other side some space and kind of the chance to talk about it, is that yeah, of course, like going for the if the grind is the same thing, then the grind just feels twice as long, and I think that also adds a lot of redundancy and a bit of tediousness towards it, right? So I do think that in some case scenarios it's not fun for some who are not a fan of just going for something that's easy and not really adding like a challenge or like a side progression point for it. I think I heard some people talking about how for progressing a relic, doing older content, if you will, for lack of a better term, would have been a decent way to at least allow you to acquire the materials or the things needed to get the relic, but at a higher cost, right? Because this is kind of a casual grind, for lack of a better term, and having like a more savage or hardcore grind for those hardcore and savage players might have been another suitable way to kind of give them a reason to run content that they may have already cleared, or something that seems a little bit more far-fetched and hardcore, and that would have worked as well. So for example, if you try to re-clear the current tier of Pandemonium 5 through 8, that would have given you the necessary materials to progress the relic weapon, would have been some option that people would have been okay with, right? And I think that that's actually a great alternative, where if you did have more than one way to acquire the materials for the relic upgrade or the baseline relic, that would have been, I think, a susceptible and good reason to do that too. But again, they usually stem it down to one tool and one form of acquirement, and I think that just makes sense too. So having more ways to do it, or even if you try and step it a little bit higher and make it like an ultimate thing, or require you to complete a content at a certain level, or do it in a certain time limit. I think that used to be an achievement that they had back then in the old Realm Reborn days, but that's also still a way that you can at least work towards content in the game and give people kind of that spark to want to work towards something that is going to be a grindy relic. But of course, if there is a simpler way to do it, like if I tried to do the 5th fight of Abyssos and that was the way to acquire the material needed to upgrade the weapon, then that would obviously be like an easy way for me to just acquire it versus going for the astronomy tome grind, right? So like having that alternate option would be nice, but I don't think that it should be a significantly easier step for some people who may not be able to acquire the same step. I feel like if it's fair to everybody, then I think that's fine, which makes sense that they would go for the tome grind, because it's really easy for anybody and everybody to go for the astronomy tome grind, especially now, because you can pretty much do any level 90 content that offers those tomes that content to actually get that material for the relic upgrade. So I think that having variety would be helpful, but also making it a grind still be worthwhile too is really the most important affectation for that. So like I said, I think that that's really how you can perceive it on both sides, and some folks don't like it, some folks do like it. I think the most important step and takeaway point for this is that it's only the first step. There's still 4 more to go, and we won't get to see those steps until we progress much further into the game, and that'll be really showcased heavily once we actually find out the next level. When the live letter comes out for patch 6.4, they're going to of course showcase to us a bit of that, the things to look forward to in the future patches to come. So we'll get 6.4, 4.1, 4.5, 4.8, all that stuff, and then they'll be able to give us further information about that patch and the weapons that come with the relic as well. So like I said, I mean, for me personally, I'm cool with it. I think that getting a 630 weapon is really helpful, because of course if you're trying to get into the raid content, or any content for that matter that's Endwalker related, you can get yourself a very strong relic really quickly with a grind, but not like a ton of effort, and be able to do that content and not really fall into this this idea of my gear is not good enough to do this content, because that weapon is very, very powerful in comparison to a lot of others that you can do it. So I think that that's really what it boils down to, and it's important to know that that grind will be, it's only the beginning. We're going to be going through a lot of steps to get to the final variation of it, and I'm sure that there's going to be some crazy twist at the end that'll really showcase to you that the grind is in fact worth it. Now again, I think with the relation to the deep dungeon, not tying it to the deep dungeon right away seemed like a missed opportunity, but I think that again, because you can work towards the deep dungeon and also still work towards the relic, even though it's not direct, it's actually nice to know that that option is there. I think that's really the caveat to it, because I think for me personally, and again to give experiences in it as well, when if you did Stormblood and the Eureka, like the old Eureka relic grind, acquiring those relics were all done through the internal Eureka system. You had Pagos, Pyros, Hydatos, and those usually were done within the actual instance of the confines of that place. But the thing is that you couldn't get anything out of doing that content except for the materials needed for getting the relic. So I think that in Bojin they fixed that a bit, because essentially you can level up in Bojin while also working towards the relic grind. And if they added that in the Stormblood relic grind, I think that that'll make that a little bit more mentally easier to manage, because you can still like cross progress something while going for the relic. And I think as of right now, only Shadowbringers and Endwalker are the 2 relics that you can essentially work on more than one thing at the same time while still going for the relic. I do have a feeling that they're going to introduce something to kind of alleviate that a bit, because not that the old relics are old and that they're not worth going for. They are of course phenomenal weapons by design and look, and they are great worthy items if you can acquire that for the glam, of course, because the true end game of the game is glam, right? So I think that going for the anima and zodiac weapons definitely matter, but again, if you're trying to go for that grind, then usually you don't need to like level up at the same time or go for like poetics. But I think some people do that as a way to give themselves a reason to cross progress and level up at the same time. Like for example, when I was going for the Zodiac weapons, I was still, you know, level like 60, right? So I can at least feel like I'm leveling up a character or a class rather, while also going for the relic at the same time. And I feel like that seems to add more fruit and value to the grind. And I think that as long as you give people something to do while also working towards the grind, I think that's always a really great way to feel rewarded, even if you know, are working towards something that you don't necessarily need to get right away, right? So I feel like that's what it boils down to. I mean, you know, we'll see. Of course, it's only the first step, and we have a lot of more things to look forward to in terms of the rest of the expansion, because we're only halfway there pretty much. And you know, let me know what you think. I feel like I'm really excited for the rest of the grind. I think it's gonna get really heavy really quickly for sure, but it's still something to look forward to, because of course when there is like that downtime of the game, you know, this is something you can do. And the deep dungeon, I'll tell you now, is not holding its punches. It's a very strong and very powerful content that people are currently working towards that grind for, because you know, you got to do Eureka Orthos with your friends to see that final boss. And even I heard the final boss is really insane, but even doing it solo, you know, and I know that for people have already started to cross that path. I personally have done up to level 440 with like some friends, and solo I've cleared 20. So you know, it's still a matter of, again, a grind that you're going to be progressing towards. So you know, at the end of the day, this is what those last patches are about before we get that next big patch, right? It's just about going for the grind and getting ready for what else is to come in the near future. So let me know what you think. Honestly, like I said, I have a very fun time with the relic as a whole. I'm not too salty about the grind being the same as it was for the first one, but I'm not too opposed to them having variation to it either. But I think all in all, I'm happy and satisfied that, you know, I get to work towards something and at least use my materials and my items towards going for a relic that I'm excited to get at the same time. So yeah, that's all that there's to it. So have fun with the relic grind, have fun with Deep Dungeon, have fun with Manderville especially, and take care.